Each week, a fleet of cruise ships departs Miami, Florida, for exotic ports of call in the South Atlantic. Ports of call that are tropical paradises, honeymoon havens, abodes of escape from everyday life, where unattached females go to meet unattached males. There is no awareness amongst the cargoes of frolicsome, light-hearted excursionists that there is only one course and one course alone by which the ships can reach their destination. They must voyage through the Devil's Triangle. This ship also made a passage into the Devil's Triangle. Year after year, the Atlantic Ocean claims innumerable ships and airplanes. Some of her shores are littered with telltale wreckage. But there is an area where the beaches are not strewn with the debris of ill-fated ships and planes, even though it is a minute sector of the vast Atlantic, where numerous ships vanish off the face of the earth, where countless planes never reach their destination, and where hundreds of yachts never return to port. This is the Devil's Triangle. Situated near one corner of the Devil's Triangle is Fort Lauderdale International Airport. Each autumn and winter, a vast horde of tourists converge here. But what about this man, who leaves the plane alone only after all of the other travelers have disembarked? What are his thoughts? He has been here before, but many years ago, when there occurred a most bizarre and blasphemous happening. Things were different then. There were no sleek jets or modern structures. The tower was old and wooden, as were the barracks that housed the officers and men stationed at Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station during and right after World War II. And it was in these barracks that 15 men in particular were quartered. 15 men who on December 4th, 1945, were scheduled to participate on a routine training flight aboard 5 Grumman Avenger torpedo bombers. A mission that to this day remains one of the most baffling mysteries of the sea. A TBM was a torpedo bomber of medium range that served throughout World War II from both carriers and island bases, and carried a crew of 3, a pilot, a radio operator, and a gunner. But on this day, the 5 planes carried only 14 men. One Marine gunner, Corporal Alan Cosner, missed the flight. What strange distortion of fate caused Corporal Cosner not to take this flight into oblivion? A quarter of a century has transpired since Alan Cosner last saw these barracks. Today, what are the thoughts reflected by ex-Marine Corporal, now Midwest school teacher, Alan Cosner?
It seems that we were to go on a routine navigation hop, the squadron of TBMs. And after we had had chow, why, we were supposed to be at the briefing room at 1 o'clock, approximately 1 o'clock, to be briefed on this routine navigation hop. 2 friends of mine, Bob Grubel and Bob Galvin, and I left the chow hall, went back to the barracks for just a matter of moments rest, stretched out on a bunk, and then for some unknown reason I decided not to go on this flight.
The mission of the day was a routine patrol flight, east for 160 miles, north for 40 miles, then southwest back to Fort Lauderdale. A triangular course within the larger Devil's Triangle. It was 2 o'clock when squadron leader Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor felt the ground give way beneath his plane. Once airborne, Flight 19 grouped into formation and headed east out over the Atlantic. What were Lieutenant Taylor's thoughts as he looked out at the other 4 planes under his command? Was he thinking of the day's mission? Or is it possible he had that same peculiar feeling that Corporal Cosner had had back at the base? But for Flight 19, it was too late to turn back. Fort Lauderdale Tower received radio contact from the 5 planes 15 minutes before they were due to land. But they did not request landing instructions as expected.
We seem to be off course. We cannot see land. Repeat, we cannot see land. We're not sure of our position. We seem to be lost. We don't know which way is west. Everything is wrong. Strange. We can't be sure of any direction. It looks like we are...
We realized something was wrong when one of the fellows reported in the barracks. Actually, with more than one squadron housed in the barracks, said that the flight was having problems. So I walked alone over to the tower, and from there I heard garbled voices stating that they were low on fuel, and actually something was wrong. They actually didn't know it was navigational problems, compasses, or what. There was a mention of white water. White water meaning actually what? What could white water really mean? Squalls. It would certainly not take down 5 planes in a small squall. I then waited a little bit longer, and the last actual sound that we heard was garbled voices saying that we're completely lost.
Now hear this. Now hear this. All members of Avenger Flight 19, stand by for roll call. Taylor, Charles C., Harper, Walter R., Devlin, George F., Bossi, Joseph T., Thielander, Herman A., Baloo, Bert E., Powers, Edward J., Thompson, Howell O., Pale Nesta, George R., Steiner, George W., Galvin, Robert F., Rubel, Robert P., Gerber, Boris J., Lightfoot, William L., Cosner,
Minutes after the appalling messages were received from Flight 19, Banana River Naval Air Station dispatched a giant Martin Mariner flying boat with a crew of 13 piloted by Lieutenant Harry G. Cohn to assist the afflicted Avengers. As these events were taking place, Cohn's standby, Lieutenant Richard Adams, was in his quarters when he was summoned to report to the flight line at once.
When I arrived at the Naval Air Station, all was mass confusion. The report had come in of 5 torpedo bombers that had taken off from Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station and were missing at sea. There was all rumors running around the base. We speculated on the return of the old German Navy. Spaceships might have come down, but there were no trace of the planes, and we were ordered to organize a air-sea rescue search. At first light, we took off and proceeded out to sea. When we arrived at the last known site of the missing aircraft, we started a air-sea expanded search. There were 8 planes involved, and we flew at wingtip intervals at approximately 300 feet above the water. We had the help of many surface ships, Army and Navy and Marine aircraft in the area, and look as hard as we could find, we couldn't find any trace of either the men or the planes.
Every type of vessel, from Navy submarines just returned from Pacific War duty to sleek new Coast Guard cutters, joined the search, which stretched for over 200 miles out into the Gulf of Mexico to 400 miles into the Atlantic. The search continued in a crisscross pattern that covered 280,000 square miles. But when the ships and planes returned to their bases, the story of the missing men and planes was the same. No survivors, no victims, no wreckage found. No survivors, no victims, no wreckage found. Yes, the story was the same, except for one astounding fact.
We received an urgent radio message that we were now searching for 6 planes instead of 5. Harry Cohn, who had taken off previously in the first PBM, was missing, as well as his 12-member crew. They apparently had disappeared while they were out searching.
They apparently had disappeared while they were out searching in the Devil's Triangle. The mystery of the tanker Marine Sulphur Queen commenced when the tugboats pulled alongside and gently nudged her bow seaward toward the Gulf of Mexico for what was to be the last time on February 2nd, 1963. Her crew of 39 could have had no apprehension as the lines from the tugs were cast free that they'd never reach their destination, Norfolk, Virginia. The 7,000-ton tanker cleared her final port of call, Beaumont, Texas, and was now alone, entering one of man's last unconquered realms, the open sea. Once away from land, the usual shipboard sea routine began. Securing loose gear, coiling and flaking lines, off-duty men lounging at the fantail, the setting of the bow watch, and chewing the gam, the sailor's term for gossiping. Her cargo of molten sulfur was sustained at a temperature of 370 degrees Fahrenheit by live steam passing through steel heating coils supplied by pipes along the deck. As the 600-foot vessel rounded the Florida Keys, a crew member radioed his wife the ship's intended arrival time. This was the last that was ever heard from the Marine Sulphur Queen. She entered the Devil's Triangle very near an area where 9 years earlier another sulfur-laden vessel, the Southern Districts, had vanished without any evidence whatsoever. And like the Southern Districts, the Marine Sulphur Queen also disappeared off the face of the earth. On February 6th, she was reported as overdue. Coast Guard bases from Key West to Norfolk dispatched aircraft and surface vessels in a systematic search extending from the eastern Gulf of Mexico to beyond the Virginia Capes.